holding a podcast listening party on May 7th and a panel of literary agents on May 16th. We also hold daily online co-working sessions for those of you working at home and wanting a little solidarity, as well as weekly virtual creative write-ins and coffee chats with local authors. So just reach out if you're interested in getting more involved. Over the past year, we've had this kind of growing awareness of all of you extremely talented environmental writers that we have here in Rhode Island. And we've been wanting to bring everyone together for some time. And while we regret that this couldn't happen in person, we also felt that sharing projects and resources with like-minded writers was increasingly important during this health crisis, when many of us are experiencing new levels of stress, isolation, maybe loss of projects or incomes, or on a more positive note, maybe some more ideas for what you want to research and write about. So this roundtable is meant to be an opportunity for you to connect and share your projects and resources with us. To start our discussion, we've invited a special guest, Dr. Louise Spelman, the founder of the nonprofit Creature Conserve, to share about her efforts to connect scientists with artists and writers. I want to say, before I introduce her, I want to say hi to Rebecca. I'm so glad you could join us. Rebecca Altman, a local environmental writer. I'm going to introduce Lucy, let you know a little more about her work, and then she's going to share with us a brief presentation. And during that, I just ask that you mute your microphones and keep all the background noise down. But please feel free to use the chat feature, which you'll find at the bottom of your screen, and you'll see the chat on your right if you want to comment or ask questions there. And then after her presentation, we'll open up the discussion. You can ask Lucy questions, I'll ask some guiding questions, but we'd mostly like to hear from you about how you're doing, about your projects, resources that you're finding helpful during this time. All right. I'm going to go ahead and introduce Lucy. Lucy Spelman is a board-certified zoo and wildlife veterinarian with degrees from Brown University and the University of California at Davis. During her tenure as the first woman and youngest person to head the Smithsonian's National Zoo, she brought 2 giant pandas to the US from China and launched a major renovation plan. She worked as a consultant for Animal Planet before moving to Central Africa to run the field program for gorilla doctors. Once back in the United States, inspired by the many connections between the arts and sciences, she began teaching biology to students at RISD. In 2015, she founded the nonprofit Creature Conserve to provide ways for artists and scientists to work together for the benefit of all animals. She is the author of 40 scientific articles, the National Geographic Animal Encyclopedia, and The Rhino with Glue-On Shoes. Lucy, thank you so much for being here with us.
Well, thank you for having me, Jody. It's really, this is such an awesome group of writers. I'm sort of thinking that what I want to do, I do have a presentation. I think I'm viewing it as maybe sort of, inspiration, maybe some thinking about what you're already thinking about slightly differently. That's at least what I hope to do with the presentation I have. It's mostly, I'm going to mostly share with you some visual art because I've worked more with visual artists, but I also recognize that, you all are basically doing what I'm going to argue we need to do more of. And maybe what you can take out of my presentation is maybe some thoughts about new ways to get at the science part that's in your writing, or new ways to think of the way you communicate it or share it as an art form. So I'm going to give the presentation because I was afraid I would go way too long if I didn't keep to slides. So I'm going to do that, and then we can go to questions. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you all, and we have to start with an elephant because. So as I was saying, what I want to do is sort of make the case why art and science together right now? Why is that so important? Why, not just why is it something that I work on, but honestly, it's something you're all already doing. This slide is one of my favorites. It's from about 20 years ago. And unfortunately, if you were to go to Namibia now, which is where I took this, you probably wouldn't find an elephant that size. I mean, look at the size of that animal compared to the zebras. It is a huge, huge animal. Look at the male and female ostrich in the background. You know, I'm sure many of you are familiar with the idea of shifting baselines, right? If we never saw huge elephants, we think they look huge now, right? So this slide is just a reminder that as time goes forward, it's important to look back and to take inspiration from what we understand, how we understand things used to be, how they are now, and how they could be in the future. So, you know, my history, essentially, I'm trained to treat all creatures. And I got to a point where I'm realizing, well, my patients are going away. I cannot treat extinction. And, you know, I wanted to shift really the way I was working. And it sort of happened almost as a result of spending a lot of time on the public engagement side as a zoo vet and then a zoo director, constantly saying, you know, animals matter, nature matters. If you can guess the species, it is a giant otter in South America eating a fish, obviously. So, you know, even the common ones, right? So I was fortunate to have been invited to give a TEDx talk in Providence in 2015 as well. And, you know, at the time I was like, well, how many lions, right? So when I started my training, we were spaying and neutering lions, but there were too many. Now we don't have enough, right? So we've got a 90% decline in even the most common animals, lions, tigers, bears. So, you know, I got to the point where I thought, well, I don't want to treat the last panda or the last, you name it. This piece of artwork is from one of the nonprofit that I founded. Creature Conserve has hosted 2 major exhibits so far, and they've traveled a bit and they're being updated. This is the one on the wildlife trade, and it's pretty horrific looking. It's made of clay, right? So it's basically the idea that, do you really want to eat shark fin soup? So I got to a point where I realized, you know, my job in taking care of animals involves people, and people love animals, but there's a disconnect between what they're willing to do about what's happening to the animal world and what we need to do for it. And this art piece is one of my favorites. It's really about the Maasai tradition, which you had to kill a lion to become a warrior. Now you save one to become a warrior. And basically, if you take a look at this illustration, you kind of get that story of, you know, identifying a problem and solving it. So I'm a big one for saying we know what to do. In my field, conservation, saving species, we can even potentially de-extinct something. So it's not that we don't know what to do. It's that we don't invest in it, right? So I'm not the first one and won't be the last to say we are the problem and the solution, right? You know, if we spend $80 billion a year as a world on conservation, we would make a huge difference. We don't even spend that, and we're spending now trillions on the disaster that's happening from COVID. So, you know, we know what to do and what is it going to take to get us to act. And you know, again, totally predictable, sadly, what is happening now and what will continue to happen. I use the term ripple effect. So, you know, we have a mass extinction of species. We know why it's happening. Sometimes it's hard to think about what are the follow-on effects. It's hard enough to think about what's happening. This is just a mock-up of a poster made by one of my RISD students. So 5 and 6 years ago, I started teaching a whole week on emerging diseases and how Ebola virus and other bad viruses come from the wildlife trade. All that we have now a lot of science literacy around this. But as you all know, it's not a new problem. It was predicted. And so it's not just that we're causing species to go extinct, but that ripple is affecting us. And it's disease, it's, you know, invasive species, it's increasing disparity, money, food, water access. And, you know, this is a baby mountain gorilla. She is one of the cutest things on earth. Her name is Endikazi. One of my mentors years ago was Clark Bunting, who founded Animal Planet for Discovery. And he said, Lucy, it's really easy to get people to care. It's really hard to get them to do something, right? So, what is it going to take for us to act? I'm working in Rwanda. I get a call. There's a baby mountain gorilla in Congo. It's not breathing well. This is probably 2006. And I end up going to Congo, and this little baby, her whole family was killed. Habituated mountain gorillas in Congo. Maybe you remember the Time magazine article. Maybe some of you are too young, but there's a Time magazine article with this slaughtered family of habituated mountain gorillas that a warlord in Congo wanted to prove that they were in charge and they could just kill all these gorillas. Well, this baby was found clinging to her mom, and it was alive. The baby was alive. There were no mountain gorillas in captivity. And the rangers couldn't leave her in the wild. So they took her, and she got super sick. She got a human, probably metapneumovirus, one of our many cold viruses that can make infants really sick. She did survive, but she lives in an orphanage basically in Congo. I've gone from zoo vet to wildlife vet, and it's easy to say, look at this adorable animal. And it's hard to say, what's it going to take for us to do something? So, I think the key question for me in the work that I do is, how are we going to get more people to get involved? This is another favorite art piece of mine. What is a pangolin? It's not a penguin. Today's apparently World Penguin Day. There's a lot on Instagram playing around with pangolin versus penguin. In this art piece, Jack is trying to get at the fact that pangolins are more like carnivores than any other animal. The full moon signifies that these animals are readily captured on a full moon. It's easy to find them at night. They're used for medicine, although there's no proven value to them. They get killed on electric fences. So he's kind of learning the story of the pangolin and telling us in this piece, what are all the problems, and trying to get us to see, well, do I have a role in this? I don't know anybody who uses pangolin scales, so it's not my fault, right? So it's still hard to get people to see how they can act. What can you do to help? And I think the root cause here is that, what we are really when we're really motivated to do something, this is a bull elephant that's not about to charge me, even though it kind of looks like he might. It's our emotions, right? And you're all writers. It's our fear. It might be our subconscious. We know we are a loss-averse species. So, it's not necessarily our intelligence that makes us act. And I'm just speaking in general. So when it comes to saving species or saving the environment, we don't necessarily make rational decisions. It's not rational to make the giant panda the species we all want to save, because they're not really a keystone species. They're probably on their way out as a species anyway. But they are incredibly appealing. And, I have all kinds of favorite animals, and these are some of them. That's Meisheng and Chen Chen, who are the two pandas at the National Zoo that I helped bring from China. So it's not that we always make rational decisions about anything, especially the planet, right? So this is where I get to, well, what if we can add art into that science? What if we can't think more about, bring our feelings more and into the equation of, science tells us that we're in a mass extinction, but how do we feel about it? And what are we going to do about it? This is just an illustration about the idea of living in an urban environment, which I think is really, it's very easy to read. You can see she's kind of playing around with the different elements of urban life. So the other problem isn't just that that science-based decision-making isn't really just science, but we also don't have very high science literacy in this country. So this illustration is one of my RISD students. Again, the topic was Ebola virus, bat transmitting diseases. This is about 5 or 6 years ago. And this student, very thoughtfully is trying to put together a storyboard, trying to understand, how do we get from bats and diseases to people and poverty? And this is one reason I'm so motivated to teach at RISD. I mean, the students are incredibly talented. They have an interest in nature and science and biology, but they don't have a lot of chance to study it. And sometimes I feel like I'm so glad that I have a chance to at least impart some of this basic science literacy, and it's not that they won't gain it, but one of the most important times I think to be crossing disciplines, right, is when you're in some kind of educational experience. Once you become an artist, then science sits over here. Once you become a scientist, then art sits over here. So merging them together is obviously what I've been focusing on. And I think, again, coming to saving species, it's maybe oversimplified, but it's like science is the roadmap. We know how we need to count species. We need to see what's happening in their habitats. But we need that motivation. This is a piece done by one of my RISD students in Guyana, South America, which is where we were for a study abroad course. And it was so hot, I couldn't even read a book. I'm just dripping with sweat. And he did this illustration with like colored marker. I don't know how he did this in the environment that we were in, but the whole idea in this case, where our Guyanese hosts were telling us about all the stories they have from the stars, and how they live in balance with nature, and the environment we were in. The giant otter is a very rare species. Fish are the thing that connect people and the otter. Everybody wants to eat fish. How can we live in harmony? It's one of the ideas behind this piece. So I've evolved to seeing my job and my role as, there's the art and the science, but even amongst those, there's understanding, which can be art and science. Those are how we understand the environment. We have to let ourselves feel a sense of compassion. We have to find a way to feel connected, and then we have to collaborate. So this why art science is I think once you start bringing the two fields together, you start seeing there's so much more that we can and should be doing. This art piece is by a student who lived in Hawaii her whole life, had no idea there were these incredibly special, very rare birds. This is the EEV. So she did this beautiful illustration of her native birds. And this is not an artist who's into science necessarily, but it gave her a chance to kind of make a connection to something that was really important to her on a personal level. So, here I am back in Guyana with some RISD students. I think it's obvious you're all environmental writers. You're using the craft of art. You're reaching more people, combining that art and that science. And I think we need to keep pushing and keep finding new ways to engage the public in the things that we care about, and definitely bringing those two elements together. And that's why I started the nonprofit. And I want to just keep going here and kind of make the case again, why art science? And in my examples, I'll share with you a little bit about what the nonprofit does. So if I were to break down, again, sort of in my work, thinking about conservation and saving species, I kind of break it down into sort of three things that we need more of. We need more informed action, we need more collaboration, and we need more what I call One Health study. This artwork is actually one of our Creature Conserve board members now. She was a former RISD student. The topic here was, again, emerging diseases. How do you get kids in Florida to pay attention to the fact that standing water is where mosquitoes are going to bring them, put them at risk of dengue fever? Well, what if you made a game of it? What if you had like a cape and you had the dengue fighters and made a game? It's like this, incredible creativity. And again, it's not like this is going to be made, but just getting the idea out there is another source of, oh, well, why would we even need a cape? Like, what is a mosquito? What is this disease that we could get? So in terms of those, three outcomes, if you will, more informed action. I posted this image on Instagram right after the coronavirus story people sort of really began to understand it. This is the 7-meter rule. When you visit the mountain gorillas, and I worked very hard on these protocols because I published the papers that show that the mountain gorillas are getting sick from people, and they're getting just our regular common cold metapneumovirus. We're obviously very concerned that they might get the COVID virus, but of course, people are the ones suffering right now. So we don't even know how the gorillas are doing. Right now, there's no tourism. But this sculpture is from the tourism headquarters in Rwanda. And it's meant to show you that's 7 meters. It's the 7-meter rule. That's 25 feet, right? Right now, we're being told to stay 6 feet away. That's not the science. The science says, 30 feet, right? So anyway, we need more informed action. And I think that if we can increase science literacy, again, with our visual art, with writing, that's sort of step one. If we're not informed, we can't take informed action. And so the nonprofit, Creature Conserve, gets at this by encouraging exhibits and bringing and hosting workshops that encourage artists and scientists to work together. And, some of that art, if it's visual art, and I'm sure in your writing pieces, sometimes it's a call to action. Like, it just sort of depends on what you're motivated to make and what you can make or create out of what you have. This artist, this is for a wildlife trade exhibit, and the more you look at this piece, I mean, the tiger is beautifully rendered, but you see there's a tag in its ear. You see it kind of looks like it's wearing a fur coat. So, she really couldn't, this the way this artist attacked this problem was, this is unacceptable, right? So that kind of call to action style. Whereas this is the same artist learning that the Iberian lynx lives in the last remaining cork forest. And what if we could do a wine label and get it, lynx friendly wine, right? So my point here is that the way we reach out, the way we communicate science or any topic isn't necessarily just education, right? It can be awareness, understanding, opinion, emotion, solving a problem. It can be just purely inspirational. This is from our current exhibit on urban wildlife, which hopefully will actually be in real life in this October. Just a delicate and appealing image about the role of bats in our environment. So there's more informed action, and then there's more collaboration. I mean, conservation, again, I'm using that as an example, that's my field of study, is not just a science. So we need cross and disciplinary work. We need more community involvement. We need more inclusive programs. The best conservation programs out there hit all those dots, but a lot of them don't. A lot of them are very, very closed. And part of that is fighting for the money, fighting for the attention, right? And so it's one feeds into the other. This is an example of one of the field projects we support, and this is in Kenya. And it's creating safe water holes for elephants, cows, and people. And you can see in the art, the painting on the second photo on the bottom, there was an artist and a scientist who are Kenyan who found Creature Conserve, found me, and asked how to collaborate. And ultimately, the artist, Sam, his paintings, which were done on cloth, became the basis of the Maasai community coming up with their own rules about how they're going to protect these newly cleaned water holes. And so if anybody scares off an elephant, they have to pay a goat or 2 goats. I don't remember the details, but literally it's all embedded in their local culture. Here's another field study. This is a scientist who's also an artist. Adam is actually in veterinary school now, and he came up with this plush pangolin. And the plush pangolin is the money from these plushes will support pangolin research. And Adam is actually now involved in one of the few scientists who studies pangolins. And then the people who are making these plushes are local. It's a local women's co-op, so they are benefiting. So again, trying to, yes, scientists can tell you where the pangolins are or not and what their problem is, but the art piece is bringing the community in and bringing money in and engaging more people than maybe this kind of program is traditionally run. And then lastly, and this really is the core of my work, the health of everything is connected. So I can't help a sick zebra if I'm not also paying attention to its environment and the people that it comes in contact with and the other animals. So everything is connected. And again, that's hitting us in the face right now with COVID. The good news is if everything's connected, then the problems are connected and so are the solutions. And I really believe in this idea of if we don't do anything because everything is connected, things are just getting worse. So we have to do something even if we're just going to keep it the way it is right now. This artwork is by one of our scholars, so Creature Conserve supports scholarships, and the idea is to give artists and scientists and again, in my case, they're interested in conservation, they want an experience, a chance to work in another environment they wouldn't necessarily work in, or collaborate with someone who they wouldn't necessarily meet. Sophie did these amazing electrical boxes. She was painting them in the community. This is in Massachusetts. And a friend of hers offered to write haikus. So a writer and a visual artist, and then the community actually chose what animals went on the boxes. She did a survey. She worked with the conservation group to determine which species to focus on. This is another one of our scholars who went off to study the bird trade, wild bird trade in Indonesia. People are still selling birds to bet on who can sing louder. I'm sure you know that trade, but here are some of her beautiful prints. She kind of knew about the wildlife trade, but she didn't know about it. And then we were able to fund her to go and kind of do a deep dive in and then make work in response to that. So, I'm not saying anything that's new. I just think we need a lot more of this, and there are many more opportunities. I think we all have more opportunities now. It's just a question of, I think, pushing for them and then having that expectation that it isn't just more of something, but that there's a goal, more informed action, more collaboration, more cross-disciplinary work, and then more, acceptance of the fact that we are all connected and seeing that as a benefit, as a way where if you solve one problem and it's connected to another problem, then you may be solving two problems at once. So that was still a little bit long, sorry about that, but that's what I wanted to share with you. And let me unshare my screen and see where we want to go now.
Thank you, Lucy. And we're probably all on mute, but I will give you a little silent applause there. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, the pictures of the creatures that you've come to know over your career, and then those lovely and inspiring pieces of art and the good work that Creature Conserve is doing. I want to open up the conversation and I want to give everyone a chance to, first of all, if you have any questions for Lucy, you can either type them into the chat and I can voice them for you, or you can unmute and ask. I also have questions for the rest of you. I want to hear what projects and things that are going on in the community right now, bringing together the sciences and the arts, as Lucy has been talking about. And I also want to welcome, David, Diana, and Patty. I think those are the people that I didn't get to say hello. We didn't get to say hello to yet. So welcome.
Thank you. Hello, this is Patty.
Hi, Patty. And where are you coming from, Patty?
Well, right now I'm coming from my home in Warwick, but I actually work in the Blackstone Valley as an environmental educator and marketing associate with the Tourism Council. But I'm also a poet.
Thank you so much for being here. David and Diana, do you want to say a brief hello? We did introductions at the beginning that we missed you.
Hi. Sorry I had to jump in late, but this is really interesting, really much appreciated.
Yeah. Hi, sorry I was late. I'm Diana. I mostly write about biology, usually a little bit more on the cell and molecular side, but yeah, definitely have a lot of interest in environmental writing and stuff and disease ecology. So yeah, it's great. Yeah.
Rebecca, do you also want to say hello?
Hi everyone. I write about plastics, but I get to collaborate with artists a fair amount. And I have found that story and art very much help the story connect in a way better than scary numbers can. So this really resonated on a number of levels. So thank you very much for hosting this and for coming to see us, Lucy.
Just to ask you a specific question, Lucy, I wonder if you and Susan or any of your other collaborators have any online or upcoming workshops, or if you want to fill in the details about that upcoming gallery show, we'd love to hear.
Yeah, I didn't go into that. So I totally loved our first art science workshop for writers that Jody hosted for us at What Cheers. So we want to do more. I think right after that, we were getting ready to have open this exhibit on urban wildlife. So we didn't have workshops planned. So I think I'm sort of rethinking, we've got to look at the calendar and rethink it. But, I think doing more is what we want to do. We haven't made firm plans, but I think the idea of we have 2 different workshops, one for visual artists, which is very much about the artist practicing thumbnail sketches, so literally sketching. And then our writer's workshop that Susan and I have, have developed is really about giving you a chance to, Susan's really your main instructor there, but it's really giving you a chance to practice listening to little tidbits of science that I might share. And we really have loved that. And so I think more of those things will come. I think it's just right now, everyone's trying to figure out their schedule and what they should be spending their time doing.
Of course.
Our urban wildlife exhibit right now it will be live in October. It's in Providence. It's also going to go to Wyoming for 4 or 5 months to the National Museum of Wildlife Art. And the one in Providence, we very much hope to have some, one night maybe for writers. It's very open how we schedule that. So got plenty of time.
Will that be at RISD or a local gallery?
That's at Sprout Co-working. So it's a big co-working space in Providence. We have 30, I think it'll be 30 works of art, all local, all local Rhode Island area artists. So some Connecticut, Southern Massachusetts. And I've just started for Earth Week, sharing artwork from the exhibit on our Instagram account. So a little preview there if you want to, I can put the, originally I was going to talk to you from the Instagram account because there's lots of great art there, but it doesn't enlarge, like it still ends up being tiny on the screen, but I'll send the link.
I'm going to just type in the chat.
Yeah. So the last 5 or 6 days, one new piece a day, I'm going to keep doing that. Yep.
Awesome. Susan, do you want to speak to how that workshop's gone and maybe how you see, we saw some great visual art from Lucy. What did you see coming out of the writing workshop? And I know, Sarah, you were part of one of those workshops. So if you guys want to speak to that, I'd love to hear.
Yeah, thank you. It was a great experience. Every time we do that, Lucy and I offer that, we learn about the process of taking fiction and poetry and turning it into, everything that Lucy was talking about, the call for action, the need for collaboration, the need for a subconscious emotional sort of thematic understanding and approach to expression, right? And finding an audience is something writers always are looking to do. And of course, broadening an audience is also something we're looking to do. The workshop at What Cheer was amazing. I was just thinking this morning that what we really need is a week-long workshop where we meet every day in the morning and people get to talk and because the people who sign up for a workshop about creatures and writing, non-human animals and fiction or poetry, or even creative nonfiction are, it's like preaching to the choir because, we all care, we all cry, we all suffer when we read those stories that we really don't want to read. And we all celebrate when we read those stories or hear those stories where there's been a success or somebody's been saved or, somebody's been named and then pulled off the beach and rehabbed, or that little baby gorilla. Part of my friendship with Lucy is just sitting there and listening to her stories over the years. And Lucy and I have come away from these workshops saying, if nobody showed up, we would spend the whole day doing exactly what we did, which is pretty cool when you can get more people doing that. So the writing that came out of it and the conversations and the thoughtful kind of response to, well, how do we do this? Why are we here? Why do we care? And how are we going to make other people care, which is more important than ever, I suppose, was fabulous. And I would love to do more workshops and, just enable more people to kind of come together with material that's hand selected for them, and then with Lucy's amazing insights and experiences, and it's just the mix is phenomenal. Sarah was there, Patrick was there, Jill was there for some of them, Diana a long time ago when we first started, you were there. Sarah, do you want to?
Yeah, I'll just say thank you. I think the big takeaway that there were a lot of them, but one of the things that I really live with every day was something you both articulated about this idea of, we sort of distinguish between like nature and human, or urban and suburban, or urban and wild. And the way Lucy was talking about it and helped me realize, like, even in a suburb, like there is wildlife everywhere. And I think for some reason I had, you know, maybe living in New York, you know, I saw obviously a lot of community gardens and Prospect Park, and I spent as much time there as possible. So I was aware that there is urban wildlife. And I, you know, had cat friends that didn't live in homes, you know, they came and things like that. But I think maybe there was this part of me just having grown up in the suburbs that was like, well, the suburbs are like a different thing. They're just totally like manufactured, whatever. But now that I'm back in a little bit less of a straight, what you would consider urban area, I realize like the suburbs have come alive for me. Like, and I go for walks now, and even just like the inspiration that I feel from my walk, like everything is alive in a way that I don't think I was really tapped in. I felt like I needed to go away to get to nature. And now I'm just like, no, it's everywhere. And even if there are areas that are a little bit more manicured, like there are animals there, they're there, and there, you know, is wild like plant life. So I don't want to ramble too much. I think you got my point, but it's really just that has woken me up. I feel like something that was like a little bit, it wasn't super conscious of, I'm now like, wow. And so it's like changed my perspective on everything, really.
That's wonderful to hear, and really resonant with like our time right now. I know that the little nature I'm able to access on my walks has been felt like magnified, I guess, in a way, if that makes sense. I do want to get a chance to hear from how people are doing now and the challenges you're facing in this moment. But before we do that, on a positive note, I wanted to hear just a little bit more about the creative projects that you're working on, any specific projects you want to share that you're excited about, and then we can move into maybe some of the challenges we're facing and resources that might help us. Does anyone want to share? Are you gonna make me call on people? There's Patty.
I'll jump in. It's Patty with one thing we're with the Tourism Council we're looking forward to, and we just celebrated the 50th anniversary of Earth Day, and of course in 1972 folks in Blackstone Valley got together to call, you might have heard of Project ZAP. I don't know if anybody here there has heard of it, but basically we're local, the local communities came together to clean the Blackstone River. And it was a one-day event held September 9th in 1972. So now we're trying to formulate ideas and things and how to celebrate for the 50th anniversary. And I actually took one of the urban writing and art workshops with Lucy and I forgot her name, so which was really great. And so, and I'm thinking that might be one aspect of our 50th is having some kind of a workshop on how to connect or how to do a call to action around water using that kind of a resource type thing. So that's what I wanted to share.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. And there's probably opportunity then to reach out and collaborate with Lucy or Susan.
Yeah.
If you want to see that come into fruition. Thank you. Anyone else want to share a project that they're excited about right now, or a story they're working on in terms of journalism? Open to all genres and projects.
So I don't know if I have that much to say about specific projects right now, but I do think that a lot of what Lucy has been saying kind of resonates with just the whole science journalism project, because in science journalism circles, we often talk about how the most important thing for any story is to show people why they should care. We always ask scientists, why do you care? And this is even in like just straight nonfiction. Yeah, and I don't know, I should also probably plug Sci and Rye, Science and Environmental Writers in Rhode Island. We're still planning on doing some Zoom events over the next couple of months. We need to nail down dates, but I'll send out an email about that. And we might be doing more like discussions where we discuss publicly published pieces, because I feel like that might be a little more accessible for people who are like, oh, I'm not a science writer per se, but I'm kind of interested. So that might be a little bit, so that's coming up. Yeah.
Thank you, Diana. I just put the information in the chat if anyone wants to follow up with Diana on the Sci and Rye writing group. And I'm seeing Karina has posted a call for some poets. Karina, do you want to speak to that? Oh, I'm so sorry.
Bite of apple in the mouth. Yeah, I'm poetry editor of a journal called Deep Times. It's the journal of the facilitators of the work that reconnects. And if any of you are familiar with Joanna Macy's work, she is an eco-philosopher who has developed a series of, well, a workshop process and curriculum for helping people get in touch with their passion for their part in the healing of the world, or the turning of the world. She calls it towards a life-sustaining culture. I've been a facilitator for a while, and we're always looking for really good poems. You need to be aware enough of her work, or of have gone to a workshop, or know about the workshops enough to um, connect your work with that. But it's not that hard. And a big piece of it is getting in touch with what's our so-called negative feelings about the state of the world, which can often overwhelm or be feared and put on the back burner while we're trying to do all this great work. But it will often come out in infighting in environmental circles, or paralysis, despair, etc. So the honoring of the pain is basically a Buddhist approach to going towards the things that we would ordinarily reject, and finding what the power is under those emotional responses, such as, a passion for justice that's under anger, and sort of reclaiming both sides of that. So if you don't feel your anger, you might lose your passion, is the theory there. I found it to be extremely helpful in my work, and we're always looking for good poems. So I'll put in my email, but really if you go to that link, that's better, because then you can see what the issues look like, what the poems look like. You can probably write a better poem than the ones that are in there. I'm just confident. And but you can also see, what the context is, and there is something on the front page of that about submitting work.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Thanks,
Sure,
Karina.
thank you for giving me the air.
Yeah, and Karina was one of our guests on one of our recent coffee chats. She has a new publication of poems, so check out her website for her work as well. Rebecca, thank you for posting this. You're editing a 4-part series for Orion magazine. I know we have a lot of fans of Orion here. Do you want to speak to that?
Sorry, Zoom catastrophe. Yeah, I was brought on to consult for Orion. We've put together a 4-part series on plastics. And we are looking for artists to particularly artists of color, to help make those pages more dynamic. Our first piece is gonna feature an artist out of the UK that takes images of some of this discarded PPE that's collecting in and around marketplaces. But there's lots of other pages we're looking for, so please feel free to reach out. I'm looking for new work.
Wonderful. Do you want to speak to your current book project? There's no pressure to do that. Thought it was related.
Yes. Right before New York shut down, I had a book go to auction, and I'm really grateful for that. Although it feels super surreal because I haven't had a chance to work on it one bit since I've been homeschooling with kiddos. But I'm working on a book, An Intimate History of Plastics. It's a braided narrative, an environmental history of plastics, or in a cultural look at plastics woven in with the story of being the daughter of a former plastics maker. My dad made polystyrene for Union Carbide. So it's a threading of legacy and history. And woven into that is some literary work of Primo Levi, who also made plastics, even though we all know him as a writer, but he also made plastics for 30 years. So it's like a deep personal investigation of our entanglement with plastics. But I don't know when I'm going to write it. I don't like it. My brain's not working, and I'm.
Well, you can beautifully articulate what you are about to write. So we'll all just look forward to that.
Be like in 10 years or something. I don't know. I don't know how to go. I don't know how to go forward from here.
We believe in you. And yeah, thank you for sharing that. I know I hear from you and other writers that it is a difficult time to create right now for a variety of factors and barriers. I wanted to hear from everyone what those are looking like for you. You can speak to challenges specific to environmental writing pre-COVID or what you're thinking about and facing right now. I'm sure sometimes it just helps to share in that solidarity. If anyone wants to speak to that.
I want to say, Pat Luvara, you were doing some really cool visual extinction Zoom stuff, which, you know, there might be something, I work with performance, and the way you were disappearing, yeah, there you go. There's something really, yeah. How do you do that? You back up or, yeah, see, like there's something to that I love. One of the things I'm working on is how to try to keep shifting perspective so people actually see the animals for what they really are as opposed to how we want them to see. I did a TEDx talk about this, but I'm specifically thinking about the Tiger King and to try to get the focus off the people a little more, and also how we view animals in films, like when we see horses in movies, what's their experience like. So the idea is to try to shift perspective, but in a fun way that's not a scolding way. That's what I haven't figured out. How not to just scold and say, you know, be a snob and say y'all are looking at the wrong things. So anyway, those are just some thoughts.
Yeah, great thoughts. Thanks for sharing. And anyone can feel free to jump in direct response to whatever is sharing here. Yeah, does anyone ever find that difficult to create from a place that feels like inspired in art when you also have a kind of a message or a political something that you want to say? Do you feel that as a tension in your art or your writing ever as environmental writers? Or maybe it's an inspiration.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Patty.
Yeah. Like I said, I write poetry, and Mary Oliver is my hero, as well as Lisa Starr, who was poet laureate, and Tina Kane also are great mentors. But one of the things I struggle with is that I want to get a message across sometimes in my writing, and I find it hard. But lately, a lot of the poems I've been writing have kind of been revolving around this changing world that we're living in with the coronavirus. I have family up in Massachusetts that all are infected with it. My sister and her family, her daughter, they all live together and they all got positive. And, you know, and I want to kind of frame some kind of message about, and I like what Lucy was talking about with regard to the instinctions and all the connectedness about with the link to diseases. And it just seems like, you know, with this disease, for us, but Earth is now having a chance to kind of breathe a little bit better, you know, because we're all kind of hanging back and not driving so much or getting on planes. So there's that aspect of it too that's kind of challenging to kind of balance the optimistic side of this disease with other things that are going on and trying to round that out. So I've been struggling with that a little bit.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Patty. I just want to acknowledge that it is 2 p.m. I understand that people are on different schedules these days. If you do need to leave the meeting, don't feel bad. You can wave or say goodbye in the chat and drop out whenever you need to. But I do want to kind of piggyback on that and maybe call out the folks from EcoRI. I've been very curious about how the current situation is affecting your work and how you're able, what does journalism and eco-journalism look like right now? If Tim or Joe or anyone wants to take that.
Tim, do you want to? I can talk a little bit about it. And Tim's the one doing the actual writing, so he has more insight. But I mean, for when it's challenging to be a journalist and to be adhering to stay-at-home orders, so we're not out in the field, we're not meeting people. The texture of our writing has changed. I think there's less observation and more just basic nuts and bolts reporting. It's just something that I've noticed since this started. But sort of when things got serious, we had a come to Jesus moment. Like what are we doing? Like how is the environment still relevant when everyone's talking about coronavirus? And we had to pivot a little bit to find touch points between the environmental issues that we already cover and the disease, and also like find a way to really cleave to our mission in an authentic way. So Tim can probably say a little bit more about the challenges or opportunities he's had in his writing, but that's sort of like top level what we found.
Oh, that's great, Joe. I think that's very well said. I think it's, as probably we're all experiencing, is that it's difficult to really kind of slow down and yet keep up with and synthesize all the, the huge flow of information and how this is all changing. I mean, even from a science perspective, I mean, you can just imagine how long it's going to take to fully digest and analyze what the science of all this is behind it, much less trying to make sense of it all right now. So I think that's, it's this kind of slow down, but try and keep up with this, this really awesome kind of event that we're all being subjected to.
Thanks. Anyone else want to speak to kind of the challenges they're seeing from a journalist's perspective or nonfiction?
Well, I'm not writing about this right now, but it seems to me that it's an extraordinary time in terms of how much really evil stuff is happening to the environment because of COVID, including the tar sands, the Keystone XL being financed by the province of Alberta as a stimulus thing, $8 billion or something like that. All the money that they couldn't get because of the success of the climate movement and shutting down the financing, private financing of that project. And there's just there's actually someone who's been keeping a list. Tim DeChristopher was telling me a whole list of all of these, like all throughout the world. So there's a lot of stories there, and there's a lot of non-activism about that because of COVID, and they're taking advantage of that, our stay-at-home orders to do stuff that they would not be able to get away with otherwise.
Yeah, interesting to hear that there's actually, there's just I guess it's, to put a positive spin on it, and inspiring to hear that there are a lot of stories out there to be written right now, important stories. I know there's a lot of lost opportunities for freelancers, but it's also kind of a call to action. Just to turn it to a little more of a positive discussion, I want to hear how people are facing these challenges. We've been in this COVID situation for over a month now, or at least. So how have you managed to find inspiration, or how are you facing these challenges, for better or worse? Bathsheba, do you want to speak to maybe how your research is going, how your work is going? Are you teaching right now as well?
So I'm on sabbatical right now and was supposed to be, I was supposed to be up in the Arctic, but I left in March when I realized that me tramping around the Arctic wasn't safe for anybody. So I have had to pretty much rejigger my plan for researching my second book, some of which means that it's just going to have to happen later, because a lot of the things I do, I cannot do on the internet. The archives that I need are mostly far away, and some of it is essentially reported, and so that I can't be doing right now either. So I've had to do some real pivoting, helped, I think, because I actually find writing to be one of the few things that allows me to say sane in this. So I've taken a lot of commissioned pieces that have to do with COVID and finished up some freelancing that I had hanging out in the world. And that's actually been really helpful because they're small, concrete things rather than trying to work on this giant amorphous early parts of book research while simultaneously in the middle of a giant amorphous global pandemic. So I've been looking for ways of finding slightly more structured pieces of what is otherwise just sort of a huge project.
Yeah, thank you. And I have, for anyone who is interested, you should follow Bathsheba on Twitter. You can put your Twitter handle in the chat if you'd like. She has some great articles, and I'm very impressed with anyone who is able to write kind of in this moment about our immediate circumstances. And the articles that I've been coming across, little sparkle hands from Rebecca there, that have been the most inspiring, I guess, or grounding, have been those that have been grounded in research and history and kind of a larger perspective. So I've really appreciated that about your work, Bathsheba. And I wondered if anyone else has other articles that they've come across or suggested resources where they're finding inspiration or kind of a way forward in their work.
I have been rereading This Changes Everything by Naomi Klein, which in the first few chapters of the book, she talks about like the missed opportunity of the 2008 financial crisis, and just in the aftermath of a time when you're facing so much cataclysm as a society, the opportunity that's there to revisit like what our values are, what we want to build. And certainly there's a lot of privilege in that, because right now a lot of people aren't in the position to think big picture, but like as we go forward, like it's just inspiring to read writing that clear about thinking systems level about the speed and the seriousness of the changes that we need to make in order to live sustainably. And I think even when I was listening to Lucy's presentation on wildlife, like just continuing to think about, it's important for me to keep thinking about that in the context of like all the political systems that like have pushed communities and kept them in poverty, that drive some of the forces of deforestation and wildlife extraction. That's like all of these systems that are underlying our forms of sustainability. So it is like, it's heavy, but for me, it's like been so important to like get that big picture context.
Thanks, Judy, and congrats again on your decision for grad school. Felt for you. Any other resources or articles or even just perspectives right now you want to share?
Yeah, I'd like to recommend two sort of older sources of wisdom or inspiration. I think it was about 15 years ago. I saw a co-presentation up at Faneuil Hall by E.O. Wilson, who's the wonderful scientist and big thinker, and a magician / cultural anthropologist, guy named David Abram, who had at that point recently published a really interesting book called The Spell of the Sensuous. And when I think of eco-journalism, right, Wilson was asked, what did he think the most important thing was? The most important thing vis-a-vis enhancing humanity's chances of making it for another 100 years. And he said, so this is about 15 years ago, he was guesstimating that the funnel of survival for our species, he thought would come in the 2070s. However scientifically based that was, or whether it was an intuition, I don't know. But in that context, he said he thought the very most important thing to enhance our chances of survival was for journalists to do more and better at communicating to the general public what scientists already knew. And that always made a lot of sense to me. So I just offer that as encouragement in the great work of folks who do that kind of nonfiction writing and research. In terms of art, and Abram, without an S, he was a real artist. But I think of the great project of art of, creating new passages from feeling to meaning. But with art, for me, the challenge around topics like this is to not make things distant and objectified unintentionally, not to provide catharsis that actually demotivates the kind of life changes and actions we have to take. It's really hard not to bum people out, right, by stimulating our mourning and our rage. And it's really hard to find something positive through art to communicate and inspire without it being merely cute and objectifying in a big way and cathartic. It's really hard when elegy and ode are kind of the same thing.
Thanks, David. Always inspiring and well put. Go ahead, Sarah. Were you going to say something?
No, I was going to respond. Go ahead, Sarah. Oh.
Yeah,
Sarah,
I was.
You
Sorry.
go.
I was just going to say, this is something that I'm doing more in my book development capacity, so it's not ready for the world yet. But the last year and a half or so, I've been working with the director of special operations at Dr. Bronner's. And they've really, for the last 15 years, have been creating their own fair trade and organic supply systems, supply chains in all of the places that they work. And they're doing a lot. They've really been doing dynamic agroforestry and regenerative agriculture for a while. And I think if I were not working on this book right now, I'd feel somewhat hopeless. Like, it's giving me a lot of hope. I mean, there's still a lot to be done, and they're a small to medium-sized company. So, but what they've done is really extraordinary. And, I think what I've seen in the last 2 months is what I could originally see maybe people thinking like, oh, this is just a book if I want to do green stuff. And, is this relevant to me if I'm not working in soaps or natural products or supply chain stuff? But really the work that they're doing, the application is so heartening. It's like there is a different way of doing business, the way that they pay, it really is, it's making me think of things that I can do, on a local level, in terms of getting more involved with local agriculture and supply chain stuff. And I've just gotten this window into different systems all over the world and ways that farmers can be cared for, and taught regenerative methods. So that it's been great for me, and I'm excited when that comes out and more people can read it. But I think they're doing interesting things, just from a business perspective that, and they've long had an activist bent as an organization. So.
Thanks, Sarah. Lucy, go ahead.
So I was just going to respond to what David was saying, and I'm not sure the best way to say it, but I like going through Instagram because because I am much more literary and word driven. There's something freeing about just looking at an image and going, I'm not really going to look at that, or I am going to look at that one. But I am actually looking for art that is informed by some understanding of what's going on. And the tiger, I don't watch television, I'll say it right there. So I haven't watched the tiger thing, but I have heard a lot about it. And, to see just another pretty tiger painting, that does not help, right? But to see one that's upsetting also doesn't help. So I think, it's like that idea of all the things that are upsetting to us right now, we're informed by our emotions. We need to get informed by what's the solution. And it's trying to find that balance. And then then that comes out in your work, right? It's not that your work has to be informative, but having learned, what do I really think about those tigers in captivity? And what do I really think about the pet tiger trade? If I had a chance to go get my photo taken with a tiger cub, would I do it? Like really going through all those thoughts, what doesn't matter what the exercise is. I think that's the piece that it takes some time and some discipline and some feeling like that matters. And I think it does matter. Then I also wanted to ask Susan, because earlier someone said well, Jody, you were asking about how do you balance wanting to have sort of a message or something that's editorial in your work, and how do you balance? And Susan, you in our workshop, you had said something, you had a great way of talking about that, because it's different for me as being, scientist first, right? Not creative first.
Yeah, whatever I said, I don't know what I said, but I wish I did, because it sounds like a good thing. I think with all writing, in every genre, if you're genuine, if you're touching the deepest part of what's getting you to sit down and put words on the paper, eventually you're going to come to the truth of the matter for you, and it's going to touch people. If you're reading good stuff that feels honest and real and informed from your own experience and from the bigger picture that you take in when you read and you see films and you watch television or whatever, you talk to people. If you're writing from that place of genuine, if you're writing the stuff that you don't really, that scares you. I wish I knew exactly what you were referring to, Lucy. I think we taped that workshop so we could listen to it. But that's always the problem, whether you're writing with a cause in mind or a specific agenda about creatures or, human to human abuse or a contagion of any kind. I mean, contagion and contact have the same etymology. It's about touching with, and it's about, touching. And, whether you're picking up that wonderful little photo of the little boy with the turtle, or, wanting to get closer to a gorilla than we should be, or getting closer to each other than we should be just because, we need our hair cut or something. That's all. We touch stuff. We touch our faces. We touch our, our pets. We touch our stuff. So that it's an issue. It's a big question for writers, for artists in general. I think, how do you find that balance? And I think you can just keep pushing on it until you're saying something that scares the hell out of you, but also feels right. That might be just the bottom line, that you just keep trying to make it authentic for your experience, and not, maybe it was also that, we don't have answers. People seem to really like to hear that. And every time I say that, I feel better. And I wish I could remember that. We can ask the questions, and that can be enough. A great piece that Lucy and I have dropped the ball on, I think, came out of the workshop at What Cheer by Leslie Jean, who's not here. She sent it to us because she took on we did a sample writing, and it ended up with the title, Who Pinned the Aardvark to the Cafeteria Wall? And it was set in a natural history museum. And Leslie took it up and wrote about it, and wrote it from the point of view of the aardvark pinned to the wall, and then the voice of the aardvark pinned to the wall. So she doesn't need, she wasn't sure, she was writing to us to understand how to end it. And I don't think it needed a resolution to the question. I think the question was so powerful, and the characters in the story were so powerful in terms of, like, there was a school class, class trip, and the teacher and the maintenance guy in the cafeteria, and this aardvark pinned to the wall, sentient and able to speak, but kind of stuck there. And it just raised the questions and maybe that's how we reach the 47% of people who seem to think this administration knows what it's doing. We just ask the questions, in an honest and informed way. And in terms of the read, I don't know if that's an answer, but I see enough people nodding that I hope and it feels like maybe that's what you're thinking of, Lucy, as well. The other thing I was going to say in terms of reading is I just finished reading Underland by Robert McFarlane, Underland, A Deep Time Journey. And Yeah, it was depressing. Yeah, the Arctic and all that stuff, but it was also amazing to read it in conjunction with the Overstory by Richard Powers, which is fiction. Underland is nonfiction. Reading those two pieces together is amazing. Also, Louise Erdrich's new book, The Night Watchman, another incredible read. I think reminding ourselves that Native Americans had to deal with smallpox and 90% of the population being wiped out, you know, in real time. And so contagion and contact and vulnerability and viruses not having, you know, our systems being, it's not new. And then I'll just say one more thing, if I could, in terms of writing projects, I'll say it now because it's going to make me commit to doing this, so that'll help. So I'm worried about, and this to the environmental writers, I would love to hear anybody's thoughts about that. I'm worried about after. I'm going to assume there's going to be an after, and I'm worried that this lack of air pollution and the fact that people are making wonderful jokes about, have you noticed that your car is getting 3 weeks to the gallon and things like that. It's cleaner, it's quieter. People, animals are, you know, having a little bit more freedom. Some of them are hungry because humans are not there with our bags of peanuts. But I'm worried about after. What if it goes back to the way it was? And I'm not talking about hunger, and I'm not talking about all the disruption and the families and the loss and everything. I'm talking about our presence on the planet as an invasive dominant species. And it's depressing to me and it scares me. And then I remembered the monarch butterfly that I raised in my house last fall. It was the hurricane. I took the caterpillar in and I had enough milkweed to feed it, and it went into chrysalis, and I spent a month on the floor not letting the cat near the basket, you know, the mesh enclosure, and it hatched one morning and came out, and I brought it outside and I had to let it go. And it was terrifying for me and really sad because I was attached to this little, it was a female, and I loved her and I didn't want to let her go, but the whole point of letting her go was to let her go, you know. And I was thinking about that. Well, if she can go and find an after from being in my house, then we can do that too, and it's going to have to be okay. So I'm thinking there's an essay or some sort of nonfiction piece there about, well, how do we just fly away? How do we go back out, you know, when we've been inside, in a responsible way? So that's it. I'm done.
Thank you, Susan, for leaving us with that question and also reminding us that it's okay to just leave the questions in our work as well. To that end, I want to make sure we can wrap up here and be respectful of your time, but I do want to open it for one last round of questions for Lucy. Before we do that, before anyone else has to go, I want to take a screenshot where everyone is aware that I'm taking a screenshot and smiling, if you don't mind, or however you want to look or not look. You can also choose not to be on video if you'd like. So if you don't mind, I'll do that, and then we'll wrap up with any last comments or questions that you might have. And I will give you a countdown here. All right, is everyone ready? All right, 3, 2, 1. Maybe I'll do one more because there's enough of us that someone probably had their eyes closed and I want to be, okay. 3, 2, 1. Thank you. All right. Any last questions for Lucy or for anyone who's spoken, or comments that you want to share?
I had a question for Lucy about something that was just alluded to about the animals. And yeah, I've been seeing a lot of posts on Facebook from the national park feed that I follow, but also other people talking about how the animals, like you see that image of the lions lying out on the streets in Africa. And I just wondered what Lucy's take on what's happening with the animal world as we're going through this in the human world, what's happening with them.
It's a great answer. You know, I think I remember years back at the National Zoo when there was a shutdown, and some animals in the zoo setting really thrive on the people visiting. Like, that's their enrichment. Some and really those are probably the only animals that should ever be in captivity, because there are animals that are very social with people. So I think that some of what's being shared, and the zoos don't have any visitors, so they're sharing their creatures more. So that's creating a little bit of some content out there. And I think there's also people noticing nature. And as was said earlier, Sarah said the nature's been there, just we haven't been noticing it. I think the concern I have, to Susan's point, is it's all connected, right? So food insecurity is why we have the wildlife trade markets, which is how we got this COVID. So the only thing that pays for conservation, quote unquote, one of the only things is tourism and ecotourism. And so it's really a double-edged sword for, nobody traveling, no ecotourism, no money coming in, no reason to protect these areas, and potentially more poaching. So there's a lot of concern that the poaching will go up. So it's supply and demand. We are all the demand, and we have to say we don't want this anymore. So it's definitely opportunity as we go back, whatever we're going back to. This is absolutely the time to make it clear what we want to pay for and what we don't. So it's dicey. Everything's dicey.
Thanks, Lucy. I see that Diana, you had a particular challenge you wanted to share. Please feel free.
Yeah, so basically, for me, I've been kind of going up and down in terms of wanting to write things. And the thing that usually stops me is just awareness that audiences tend to reject things that are didactic. What David was saying earlier about how, Wilson was like, oh, we need people who are good at communicating what scientists know. And it's like, we have so many people who are so good at communicating what scientists know. But the thing that's really been bothering me in the past few weeks is that I've been building board games and learning about game design, and one of the most famous games in the last 20 years, bestseller, you can find it at any bookstore when the bookstores are open, is Pandemic. And it's literally about a pandemic. And the thing about the game is that there's no death in the board game Pandemic. It centers transmission rate and connectivity between outbreaks. And I just felt like if people had understood early on that it's not just about the death rate, it's about how fast the virus moves between places, we wouldn't be a lot better off. And it just blows my mind. I've seen smart people who I played this game with, they don't read any intention. They don't read any didactic intent from this game, even though it's like really, really effective. I don't know. Sorry, that was like a tangent, but it's just been, like I said in the comment, it's been vexing me, and it's like, but I guess like that kind of ties into what Lucy was saying originally about how like art makes things more inclusive, and kind of like puts things in like an imaginary landscape or language that more people can interpret, I guess, and like get the messages out there, and that's really important. But it's also, part of me is just kind of like, oh, there's like some like artistic languages we could use to make to share ideas and get people to care, but like we just don't use them that way usually, and people don't expect them to be used that way, so they're not looking for, I don't know. But I think it's, sorry, I don't know, this just kind of was like, just kind of playing on my head in a loop during it.
Thanks for sharing that. It's awesome that you're working with board games, and that there's so many different mediums and artistic mediums through which a message could be powerfully communicated if done in that way. Sarah, were you going to say something? I'm sorry if I... Okay, you good.
No, I got bounced off, but
okay. All right, well, we should probably wrap up here. Are there any last final comments or questions? Don't want to cut anyone off. All right. Well, I want to thank everyone for being here. Thank you so much for contributing. I will do my best to communicate the resources into the club Slack. And if you have any follow-ups or need a reminder of some of those resources that were shared, please feel free to email me. My email is at the top of the chat. I want to thank Lucy in particular. Thank you for sharing with us about Creature Conserve. Keep us informed about any workshops or upcoming opportunities, and we'll do the best to get the word out to the community. And thank you to EcoRI for being here and everyone else. It was really encouraging to hear from you and your projects, and we're wishing you the best. Bye. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Jody.
Thank you, Lucy. Bye, everyone. Great to see you.